And we're live. Georgi Dinkov, how are you, sir?
Hey, glad to see you again.
Well,
Still afloat, right?
yeah,
Still making podcasts possible.
we're just talking about censorship.
That's right.
This channel being totally shadow banned, and knowing that for a long time. Even speaking to somebody at Google who told me as much, but we do have a large listenership on Spotify, but I don't trust that platform either. But anyways, what's new with you? How is DC? The same question I always ask.
DC, well, again, still afloat. Not, it hasn't been nuked yet. I mean, I think I told you the fences around the White House are almost all of them are going to accept the innermost, and even that one is, it looks like a chicken coop fence. It's not exactly. It's not like the reinforced steel in the multiple layers that they used to have. And now that DC is fully reopened, basically like the crowds are streaming in. It's you can barely you walk on the street, but it's like this crazy like air of lawlessness in the city. I think MPD is getting defunded a little bit, or at least not officially, but their budget for this year is like 20 to 30% lower. And they were never really known as like one of the hardcore police departments in the United States. I would say, they were probably the least, like the most lenient in terms of not busting people for smoking weed, not busting people for like even for doing more serious drugs on the street or drinking out of like bottles that are not in a brown paper bag. In comparison, I always thought I've been to like New York City and Texas and California and Las Vegas.
San Francisco, people are shooting up on the street.
Yeah. I've been there, and I think it's kind of DC is kind of becoming like that a little bit. Yesterday, I passed through a famous area here called, not famous, but like well known, called DuPont Circle. And there were these crowds that were basically like sitting there, smoking, doing drugs, even, more hardcore stuff. People were brandishing guns. And I was just we're passing through with my wife and two children. So, we felt quite unsafe. And then there were just only two patrol cars, and the cops were nowhere to be seen. I think they were sitting inside the cars. Before a couple of years ago, even like a homeless fight at that DuPont Circle will like draw immediately 4 or 5 cruisers, and cops will come out and try to start arresting people. Now it was basically a huge rowdy crowd doing whatever, and then the police like weren't bothering them at all.
Once again, you would have had to bust out your Bulgarian jiu-jitsu immediately if anything had happened.
More like a high caliber weapon or something else. I am still seriously thinking about that, because even though the city is reopened, now you can feel it in the air. I mean, basically fights are breaking out every once in a while. When we go to the children's playground, there's a basketball court nearby. There are people. They've always been people playing there, but now they're openly doing drugs and selling drugs, right? And this is like literally 30 feet away from the children's playground. And it's not an area where you used to see that in the past, because cops will bust it. But now nobody's batting an eyelash.
If you don't want to talk about this, tell me. But is there any thought of like moving or anything? Could you move your whole operation? And again, it's none of my business, but it's
I mean, my brother and his wife are here, so you'll be, if I move, you'll probably just across the river, like across the state line. I mean, this is a tiny, comparatively small city, so either in Maryland or Virginia, or in the suburbs, basically. And over there, I think things are more under control. So yeah, it wouldn't be that difficult to move the operation nearby. But as far as like uprooting the entire family and going to a completely different part of the country, I think that will be more difficult. And I'll only consider it if life in the area becomes intolerable. And there's some signs that some of the suburbs are basically like turning against this lawlessness and saying enough is enough, right? We need to go back to, I don't want to call it a normal lifestyle, because, police is out of control. But they're basically saying, there needs to be some law, or at least some safety on the streets. And which is not happening in DC. In fact, I think the police has been ordered to turn a blind eye to anything less than a felony. So that means somebody can beat the crap out of you on the street, or like hit you, or like hurt your children. And depending on the code, like if it's like a 3rd-degree felony, police would probably not arrest that person. So I did not. I mean, in the past, there's some rough areas in the city, especially the southeast, the northeast, and the southwest. Only northwest is kind of known as like the ritzy area. And in the past, like you would hear about shootings in these other three quadrants, but now they're happening in the Northwest. In fact, there was basically this gang shootout in the middle of the day in Northwest in an area that was like fully residential. You've never heard or seen this kind of stuff before there. And then the police let them go. I mean, they saw the attackers. They were shooting up a construction site, and then they let them go and chased them with a helicopter because they were concerned basically that if they chase them with the car, they're going to crash and kill somebody because it's such a heavily residential area. Anyways, eventually they got caught, but this was unheard of to like basically hear about a gang shootout in Northwest DC at a construction site where apparently some people were working. They were members of a rival gang, and the other gang arrived in a car, started shooting at the construction site. It's pretty wild. So yeah, I mean, DC seems to be back to open normal as before, but parts of the craziness that came with the pandemic and the lockdowns and everything else, I think it's here to stay. I just don't see how these things will get like won back by the authorities.
It's like putting toothpaste back in the
exactly.
tube or whatever. They've
scrambling an egg.
They've ruined society. For how long? Who knows? But it's they've ruined people's brains and consciousness about the world they live in and health and disease. It's insane.
Everything destroyed families. I mean, some of it, to be honest, some of it is always been there, right? I mean, you've always known that certain parts of your family are like beyond salvation, and they probably think the same thing about you. But like, as long as life is normal, by you meaning me as well, right? I mean, like you is the figurative you.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And but we tolerate this because we know that everybody has the unique view on life, right? And as long as they don't bother you too much, which usually means, like your life, you have your life together and nobody's bothering you too much, right? But then when there's this pandemic and your freedoms are severely restricted, you don't know how basically what's going to happen tomorrow. The schools are closed, like everybody's freaking out, right? But then even a minor irritation can turn into like a really social disaster because you just don't have the energetic reserves to cope with this anymore, and you're prone to tell your relatives or them to tell you to go F yourself because I can't deal with your craziness right now, right? And I've seen this so many times in our apartment building. I mean, I think I told you we actually moved out of one apartment building and moved into a new place in March because the old apartment building, which was much larger, had mentally ill people roaming the halls, basically drawing stuff on drawing things on the walls, jumping out of windows. Two of them, I think, committed suicide because I saw them being wheeled out of like with their face covered, which to me means they're done, right? Being wheeled out, and so basically the entire building went. You felt like you live in an asylum.
Yeah.
And the normal people were staying inside, which was quickly turning them into abnormal people. There were fights, gunfights, people drive-by shootings, all this kind of stuff. So I don't know how this is going to normalize. This is a generational trauma, which. I guess the pharmaceutical companies are rubbing their hands like, yeah, new clients for life. We're gonna double our clientele. It's really pretty sad, but I guess if you think about it, there's nothing that happened during this pandemic that does not enrich the Fortune 500 and their owners. I mean, think about it. Did anything bad happen to these companies or the 1%?
I would find it. I saved it actually a few hours ago, but it was like the workers lose $3.7 billion during the pandemic.
Well, yeah,
and then it was
the
like
the
billionaires gained $3.9 billion or something.
Trillion.
Oh, trillion. Yeah. And it was obviously it was on the news. It's like the largest transfer of wealth in history. That's like I feel like that's a kind of a useful way of thinking about all this stuff is that it's the end of capitalism. Like the vulture capitalists are winning capitalism, and we're all going to be their serfs now because they're
disaster capitalism has kind of like it's almost reaching a limit, right? I think this is probably the last event. If assuming it was all planned and it was all of this was on purpose, it was probably the last event that will be done under the guise of capitalism. People are just not going to buy this stuff anymore. And even if you give them another pandemic and a more lethal virus, I think knowing people that have been through this already, I would say even the pandemic proponents, the people who love to get this mRNA vaccine inside of their bodies, even they're saying like, there's no way I'm going to endure another shutdown. If there's another shutdown, we'll just move out. And if that means leaving the country, so be it. Now, of course, it's easily said than done. Many people will say many things, doesn't necessarily mean they'll do it. I mean, I think even the ones that were basically like were heavily in support of the measures are saying this is abnormal. I cannot live for another year like that. And I can't even believe. I mean, I don't even want to think to what's happening to the British people who are still under lockdown, and it looks like over there it's not going to get lifted. Now they're already talking about extending yet again beyond I think July 21st was like the latest extension.
Yeah.
And now they're already starting to say like, well, the Delta COVID variant coming from India, we really need to continue social distancing and lockdowns, and let's see what happens. I mean, if the Brits go along with that, I think that will be the end of that country. You're either going to have everybody go completely berserk and start, committing mass suicides or riot, right? And basically there will be utter lawlessness, which actually I'm not sure the cabal is ready to deal with. I mean, Ray kept saying like, yeah, they're ready to use their, nuclear weapons on people and stuff like that. But keep in mind that most of the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution depends on computers, which are heavily vulnerable to EMP, electromagnetic pulses. You can actually destroy the entire country's IT infrastructure by dropping, a single decently sized nuclear weapon. So I mean, I don't think nukes are an option for domestic disturbances. And as far as putting them down with regular police force and regular military, I mean, keep in mind a lot of those people have families who are also locked down, and it's going to get messy. So let's see what happens. But as of right now, I think America is probably the most open place you can be. Ironically,
I talk to people in Canada, the UK, and Australia regularly, and they all uniformly say they feel like they're in hell. And so, I think you're right. Did you know how when we first started talking to Ray, he kept bringing up Eric Schmidt? Like I recently revisited that, and this is one of I think his education newsletter in May 2019. Eric Schmidt, chairman of is that a spelling error? Of the secretive National Security Commission of Artificial Intelligence, former chairman of the Defense of Innovation Board, and until recently CEO and chairman of Google, and still a major shareholder and advisor there, revealed some of the commission's recommendations, explaining that the urgency of shutting down the present economy to force rapid digital automation in everything: education, medicine, production, and shopping, communication, and travel. And like, have you ever gone deep on this? It's mildly interesting, just because I feel like a lot of people are missing like the why. Like, why would all of this happen? And I feel like this it explains it.
I think he basically said that's the only way of competing with China. Basically China has 1.4 billion slave laborers. Plus, there's no liberty there. Everything is digitized, or at least that's how China is moving. Mm-hmm. They're leading the world in terms of deploying 5G and everything else. They don't give a rat's ass, pardon the expression, about whether 5G causes cancer or not. But he kind of wants to see the same thing here. He's saying, look, we have the potential because we still kind of control the world. I mean, it's eroding our grip on power worldwide is eroding, but we still control the world more or less. So if we could destroy the domestic resistance, which is turn our population to be more like China's, then we have a great shot at basically not only maintaining this hegemony, but like extending it. And even if that means eventually going to war with China, I think he's the one who's saying like, no, I think the Chinese, if we become like them, they'll be more willing to trade with us. And agree with basically playing second fiddle, second violin, whatever the expression is, than going to war. So, but he's saying we need to become like them, or at least like implement their methods, because clearly their methods are winning, and their methods have nothing to do with freedom. We here in America have kind of like overestimated the importance of freedom for good development. So that's what it comes down to. I think it's not only for profit; it's for control, and because. Ultimately, keep in mind, information technology is ultimately a tool of control. It has never been about anything else. Because I used to be in the startup world, in the IT world, and every venture capital meeting that I would go to, like basically asking for funding, they always started with this joke. Well, the dirty joke of Silicon Valley is that every single IT company is basically trying to replace humans in whatever niche industry they're working, and do things cheaper. more efficiently and faster, et cetera, by doing it with machines instead of humans. That's really what IT is all about. All this thing about like complementing people, like improving people's decisions and things like that, that's really just a step in the door, like and dust in your face. They have no interest in keeping humans around if they could get away by doing everything digitally. And for a lot of the jobs, it's already been done. So Eric Schmidt is the master champion of this attitude. Of being basically, he said this. I remember because I used to follow him. He's actually an author. He's a fairly decent programmer, computer programmer. He's an author of something called the Corn Shell, which is used in a Linux operating system, and basically the Unix operating systems. One of the shells that's available there. So I used to like the guy a lot because of his programming abilities. But then I remember around 2005, 2006, he started getting very political. And even though at the time I wasn't that much involved with politics, something about his vision rubbed me wrong. Like he started talking about transhumanism before Ray Kurzweil even got on the seat. I wouldn't be surprised actually if Ray Kurzweil is just a mouthpiece for Eric Schmidt. A lot of the stuff that Ray says is not our Ray, but Kurzweil is straight up taken, verbatim from Eric Schmidt's presentations that he gives to worldwide leaders. But I think he also went. Remember we talked about him and Bill Gates getting Cyprus citizenships? You don't know why was that? I think he tried to pitch the same thing to Europe, to the European Union, and they were a lot less receptive than the American companies. They thought that Europe is much more difficult to digitize fully, and basically I think they told him like, look, let's see what China can do with their Belt and Road Initiative, which is mostly focused on trade. And we're not very keen on 5G. The European Union headquarters is in Brussels, and I think they voted there. Some kind of a commission within the European Union said no 5G in Brussels because it's too dangerous for health. So it's not going to be as easy as it is in the States to roll out 5G and compete with the Chinese. So I think one of the reasons he got a Cyprus citizenship is to start some of these projects there. And try to basically like sort of implant them, whether the Europeans like it or not. His idea was that if these things start making money, the Europeans will be convinced to adopt them. But I don't know how much of that has happened already because he's pretty tight-lipped on that. He doesn't speak about his European activities. But I know that he went and met with Merkel, Germany's leader. I think he met with Bojo. And I think he also met with like the Prime Minister of Finland, female, and then the Prime Minister, I think, of Denmark. And there was some articles about the meetings, and apparently they were fairly contentious. So, which means whatever Schmidt was trying to sell, or the price that he was asking, didn't basically like they did not like it. So we'll see. I think he will continue to be mostly active here.
Yeah, one of the worrying parts of him interfacing with the Pentagon or leading some initiative. I forgot what the specific thing
Danny, there's no interfacing with the Pentagon. Yeah. All these companies are one. They're just the arm, like a tentacle of the Pentagon.
Yeah. No, that's what I didn't know the verbiage, but like again, like depopulation, like you talked about, we've referenced on the show before, was talked about in the Memorandum 200 or the Kissinger report as a strategy for the third world. And so now the chickens are coming home to roost and they're doing the same to us. And so again, I think people find that idea to be not palatable and, they would never do that to us, and I know we've talked about this 100,000 times, but yeah, I just revisited that Eric Schmidt thing because I hadn't thought about it for quite some time.
I mean, let's see what he has. Let me see if I find this. There's this agency actually, which is truly a merger of corporations and governments. I'm blanking on its name.
Oh, BlackRock? Or Vanguard?
No. Let me see if this is the...
Thank you, everybody, for hanging out Saturday night. Appreciate it. Ray will be on next Friday, and we're going to do a super chat fundraiser Q&A that right now, not that you guys care, but I'm running everything from a single computer, and that's why my computer is like on the verge of overheating. It's actually gotten a lot interrupt me at any time, Georgi. It's gotten a lot cooler in Mexico, and so things are okay, but when it was hot, my computer would correspondingly heat up. So anyways, we're going to buy a little bit of new gear, and I think that's going to make everything run a lot smoother. And so I already talked with Ray, and he was okay with doing a super chat fundraiser for the next time. And I won't be curating the questions. You know, I know a lot of you guys hate that. So I'll just be rifling through questions, and it will be first come, first serve, and I'll just read them off chronologically.
Yeah, let's see. National strategy. There's an agency basically, which is a government agency, but its purpose is to basically interact with the biggest companies in the States, and also like companies that run critical infrastructure projects and things like that. And basically so basically the companies tell them who out there is acting against them, and I think the government agency is kind of acting like the law enforcement arm of the corporations. At this point, I mean, like, I don't even know why they bother creating a separate agency.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's pretty obvious the entire federal government is acting like this. But there is one. When I find it later, I'll send it to you. But there is officially an agency, and if you remember, there was when Steve Jobs was still alive, and there was when the first or the second version of the iPhones, somehow it leaked. Somebody who had it with him forgot it at Starbucks.
I remember that whole story.
Journalist found it, and he got busted by like unnamed, unmarked, like some kind of armed people, right? And basically they arrested him. They kept him like in handcuffs, lying on his face for hours. Went to his entire house, took everything he had, and then later on, when he tried to file a complaint with the police said that these people are beyond, like they cannot be touched.
Are you sure it wasn't Apple's private security squad though?
I'm pretty sure it wasn't. I'm pretty sure it was actually a government agency acting on the orders of Steve Jobs.
Okay, interesting, because I think I worked at Apple during that time. Like, so I remember everybody thinking it was like a tabloid story when it happened, and we're trying to get all. It was like gigantic story when it happened. It was like the
Apple security thing was there, but they didn't do the raid. They were kind of in there like as support, but the actual busting through the door and arresting the guy and taking all of his equipment. I think there was this federal agency, and they justified it by saying that they were acting on tips from Apple. There was industrial espionage or something under some kind of a obscure rule, right? And then it turned out these people cannot be sued. They cannot be named. He doesn't even know how to get his equipment back. And eventually, I think he either sued or somehow Steve Jobs again got involved. He compensated him for the trouble and told him, like, if you ever see something like this, do not be taking this phone or wherever you see this cool gadget on the table at Starbucks. And the guy said, "Are you kidding me? Who the hell are you to be telling me this? If somebody forgets something on the table, it's not illegal to take it. I mean, I'm not receiving stolen property, right?" Anyways, but long story short, large corporations, if they want you busted, they will find at least one special agency assisting them in the process.
Yeah, I believe it. One story before we get into articles. So Apple used to fly their geniuses or the tech people to Cupertino to train. It was actually kind of cool. And the guy that was teaching our class was like, "Do not talk to Steve Jobs if you see him." Like, that's like the first rule. Do not approach him. Do not talk to him. And then, of course, somebody in our group talked to him, and I actually didn't really overhear what it was, like the cringiest conversation imaginable. And just remember that.
But you saw him on campus? Like,
yeah, it was like right before he died. He was like skin and bones. He was like he's like a walking skeleton. It was really sad. Anyways,
I wouldn't want to talk to a person like this anyways. I mean, like, this person is dying. The vibe they give away probably is just, you don't want to be around them.
I think I was on the all milk diet at the time, so I didn't know very much.
You were already a vegetarian?
No, it was like, have you ever heard of the milk diet? It's like an old thing.
You only do milk.
Yeah. So I had read, I kind of like transitioned off carnivore, but I didn't tolerate milk at all. So it was like when we were doing the classes, like putting back together a MacBook or something, I'd be running to the bathroom like every, 45 minutes. My instructor probably thought I was doing drugs or something.
You say, sure, they're white and you ingest them. You don't snort them. Some people do, but you don't snort them.
Okay, anyways, guys, thank you so much. Saturday evening hanging out with us, and appreciate it. We have an amazing audience, and we'll be back this Friday with Ray. Okay, let me just do it quick.
Oh, by the way, my recipe, the improved recipe of the burgers with eggs, gelatin, and calcium turned out great.
I got so many questions about that, but I don't make the burgers. I don't know the recipe.
It's not that difficult. Just calcium carbonate, a few raw eggs, and basically 10 grams of gelatin per pound of ground meat.
Oh, the questions were about what can of the gelatin are you using hydrolyzed gelatin or the type you bloom or what?
I don't think it matters. I use Nox and you work.
Okay, so that's the type you usually have to bloom that and put it in cold water. So you don't do that.
No, basically there's enough water already in the ground beef. So and also when you put the eggs, you crack a few. Like I think you do like 2 eggs per pound of ground beef. So you crack the eggs, you scramble them, right, and you pour it on top of the ground beef, and you start mashing around until it's all like nice and mushy, and then you pour the gelatin on top. Keep like mashing it around, and then you add the calcium, and then it's ready to go. And because the eggs contain lecithin, choline, right? It binds the calcium really well, so it's not gonna go to the surface or like stick in the middle of the burger. It's really nice and distributed, and you couldn't even taste it. I mean, but you eat 2 of those burgers and the temperature shoots up immediately.
Straight from the source, people. I don't know how to make the bioenergetic Bulgarian beef burgers. They're Georgi's.
They're not Bulgarian. They're I don't know, fusion. Let's call them fusion.
I really think that name is catching on. Okay. Okay, guys, give this episode a like. It really helps us out. Appreciate it. And okay, let's get into articles. So there are some remnants from the last time. And so
yes, and I sent you another 5 or 6.
I got all those. And this archive one is that anemia one. I just had to archive it because the website was so. Do you see this one?
The anemia about like the iron supplements, like not being sufficient. Yeah, let's start with that one because I think that's a great topic. People who tend to consume a lot of milk or dairy products, sometimes they will get like an iron deficiency anemia. And if they've emailed Pete, and they keep asking, should I take iron supplements or not? And he keeps saying no. He asked them to do the full test, not just serum iron, but like ferritin, saturation index, right? And like TIBC, transferrin, and unless ferritin is low, then he basically says there's no need. But even when ferritin is low, his response usually is usually it's a result of low thyroid, because ferritin is a protein, the iron carrying protein that's produced by the liver. So usually people with liver disease or malfunctioning liver will have low ferritin. And this new study came out saying that in many, especially children, in many people like with anemia, if you give them iron supplements, even if it's an iron deficiency anemia, their status doesn't improve. I mean, which is not surprising because, and in fact, you can probably make yourself worse because if you don't produce enough ferritin, all of this iron that you take in floats around in the free form and it wreaks havoc, right? It creates all this lipofuscin. It's directly toxic to your brain and your heart and your liver and your spleen and your gonads and many other organs, pretty much every organ. So this basically article said nutritional status matters, and I think by that, by extension or by association, it also means thyroid status matters. And why? Some people say, well, that's too big of a jump. I have an article on the blog from I think the week before, which showed that anemia can be cured by administering coenzyme Q10. In other words, anemia is a sign of energetic deficiency. It's a result of the energetic deficiency, also the cause, right? But if you're pumping yourself full of iron and in reality one of your electron transport chain complexes is not working, then basically you're not gonna improve things. Just search for CoQ10. Yeah, there we go.
First one?
Mitochondrial dysfunction may be the cause of anemia. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So if you open that one and you search do control it for CoQ10, you'll see that basically the reason for the anemia was a deficiency in complex. I think complex 2, which is the one that handles that needs coenzyme Q10 to work. And when they administered CoQ10, the anemia disappeared, despite the fact that basically I think iron stores were also low. So this tells us that in order to utilize iron, your energetic state needs to be basically your metabolism needs to be up and running and in good shape, because if it's not, then you may be temporarily improving things, but also there's a lot of toxicity associated with iron. And guess what? The doctors are not kidding around when they put you on iron. If they think you have iron deficiency anemia, I think they prescribe 60 milligrams 3 times a day for an adult. That's absurd. Like you can actually give yourself liver failure if you're taking these amounts for some people, especially if you already have compromised liver function. So before you start jumping on the iron supplementation, do a few tests that will demonstrate if you have an energetic deficiency, and that needs to be addressed as well before you can actually make use of the iron, if it's even needed. Because in a proportion of the animals that were given coenzyme Q10, the anemia disappeared despite them not receiving additional iron. Let me just turn on the lights.
Yeah. Again, thanks everybody. Sincerely appreciate it. We have an amazing audience. Feel very fortunate. Georgi, I always talking about getting feedback from this show and being extremely heartened. People are maybe it's because we're doing these regularly that people are really becoming into it. And I think the move to Spotify really helped as well. Isn't there a protein in the liver called like erythropoietin or something that is regulated by thyroid?
Erythropoietin. It's basically regulated. It's produced by the kidneys.
Okay.
And it's used as a doping agent in endurance sports. Lance Armstrong was busted for doing blood transfusions, which basically give you extra EPO but it stays in your blood for only a couple of days. So it's dangerous to upregulate the production of EPO because you can get a blood clot. Basically, the blood becomes really thick and viscous. So you don't want to overdo it. But if it's for winning a gold medal, like Olympic gold medal, I guess to them the risk is worth it. And also you can get caught, right? One of the blood tests, if you have a high levels of EPO, they'll check. They'll say unless you have liver cancer or a spleen, there's something wrong with your spleen, because the spleen is responsible for processing the EPO. Then you've most likely doped. You've done blood transfusions, and then you get kicked out. So he had like this special method of transfusion figured out by his doctor, where he could get his own blood taken out, oxygenized, and stored in the fridge, and then basically like he would get like small transfusions throughout the day several times in order to conceal the fact that he's getting extra EPO in his blood. So yeah.
This is kind of related. Isn't ferritin is an acute phase reactant produced by the liver? And Ray responded to somebody asking about these, and he's basically like, most of the time when acute phase reactants increase, it's the bad. And so like really high levels of ferritin, but also I know that hypothyroidism can cause low ferritin. And I see that fairly often, especially in women. They'll have like 10 or 20 levels of ferritin. But to preview one of the questions we got, they were asking about ceruloplasmin. And there is a general view in some circles on the internet that you should be trying very hard to increase ceruloplasmin. But I found a lot of evidence that it was increased in bad situations. And so
like lymphoma.
And it's an acute phase reactant as well. And so I'm really skeptical of that idea.
But thyroid actually can raise ceruloplasmin if it's low. So it's really, I guess it comes down to like, is it elevated, or is it basically, are you trying to correct like a deficiency of it? You don't want to be deficient, because if you're deficient in ferritin or ceruloplasmin, pretty much any iron or copper you get through the diet can cause problems.
Yeah, so let me rephrase this. Maybe they rise defensively. It's not like bad for the organism that they rise. Right. It's good, but it would be the same thing as that having the reduced the cell being overly reduced. It wouldn't be a bad thing. It's just a response to the stress of what's happening in the cell. And so anyways,
it's a response to an inflammatory reaction. Basically, like there's this condition, they call it anemia of chronic disease, which is characterized by low serum iron but very high ferritin. That's certainly not anemia. And if you're and actually the doctors already know about it, because they're saying this cannot be cured by iron supplements, and you should not be taking iron supplements in this situation, because it can make situation much worse, right? If your ferritin is very high, even a tiny amount of iron basically can push you over the edge. And I think usually the anemia of chronic disease, they actually ask you to donate blood in order to lower the ferritin, while at the same time they're carefully supplementing you with iron. But basically the misnomer, it's a misnomer to call it an anemia. It's basically an inflammatory reaction of chronic disease. People with cancer tend to have it very often. People with Alzheimer's tend to have it not as often as the cancer patients, but also have it more often than the general population. And I think people with chronic inflammatory diseases like scleroderma or lupus also tend to have elevated ferritin, and it's recognized that in these conditions, at least, the high ferritin is not a good sign. In general, it's recognized, but for some reason, this stupid name, anemia of chronic disease, was coined, even though there's nothing anemic about it. These people are not lacking iron. In fact, they're iron overloaded.
Just to finish up this, so the ceruloplasmin is a copper-containing enzyme protein that binds iron. Is that right?
Yes, it can bind iron as well. So sometimes, if you for whatever reason you're not producing enough ferritin, ceruloplasmin can rise as an alternative carrier of iron.
And man, I really should have read up on this before asking questions. But there was one paper that I did seek out, and they were saying, although commonly ceruloplasmin is thought of as the main copper regulating protein, not enzyme, right? They were saying there was like 20 other ones that were often not mentioned, but. And then also, doesn't a cell spill out its iron contents either when it dies? So again, something like ceruloplasmin would be defensive. You wouldn't want to increase that.
That right there explains that when you have a necrotic cell death and the cells are dying very quickly at a large number of them, which happens especially in cancer, and they're dying and rupturing and dumping their contents into the bloodstream, you would have ferritin and or ceruloplasmin rise to pick up those extra metals and like basically sequester them.
Yeah, there is a paper saying that ferritin is the result of cell death, and again, I can't open my Evernote because my computer will crash, but I could find that really quickly. I'm driving this.
The other thing is infections, because many of them require iron. Many of the bacteria, you often have fever reaction because it deprives the bacteria of tryptophan, which is absolutely required for growth, which tells you just how good tryptophan is for you. So the fever reaction is, as was known back in the day in the 70s, not that anything has changed, but it's being quickly forgotten, that the fever reaction is the body's way to sequester iron and tryptophan and deprive the pathogenic organism of access to them. And in a fever reaction, people with fever, if you test they usually have an elevated ferritin and or ceruloplasmin as well.
Yeah, I'm just driving this into the ground because it's like kind of a new fad on the internet right now in the health world. Okay, Georgi, another article. What do you think?
Let's see. Oh, the upregulated serotonin synthesis may be a biomarker for breast cancer. I think that's a great one because most people do not associate neurotransmitters with hormonal cancers, but here they are. And in fact, it was the most highly predictive biomarker of that distinguished between normal tissue, or at least cancer in situ, like stage 0, whatever they call it, mildly dysplastic tissue, versus the highly aggressive types. And not only the hormonally positive ones, if you believe there is hormonally positive and hormonally negative one, but also the triple negative breast cancer tissue. So serotonin was a very good way. In other words, serotonin contents of the tissue that you're examining inside, the serotonin levels inside of those cells was a highly reliable predictor that the tissue has become cancerous. And if it hasn't already, then it will become cancerous, and it will be one of the more aggressive and difficult to treat cancers, such as the triple negative breast cancer. Once again, if serotonin is one of the master regulators of metabolism, shouldn't come to as any surprise that its levels are upregulated in highly energetically deranged cells.
In your estimation, did you like look at serotonin and estrogen differently? Because they seem to do so many of the same things on cells. Is there some differentiating feature that you've come across in all of your reading?
Estrogen is a direct reductant, and to a degree so is serotonin. But also serotonin has direct suppressive effects on the thyroid gland, while I think estrogen's effects are more in terms of like causing structural damage, which eventually the thyroid starts leaking its contents into, again, the cells start to die, and you start developing an autoimmune reaction, becoming Hashimoto, right? But they promote each other. Estrogen increases both the expression of tryptophan hydroxylase, so you're making more of that enzyme, and also increases its activity. So you'll be more capable of producing serotonin and producing more serotonin, provided tryptophan is available, right? And also, I think estrogen can also displace tryptophan from albumin, so you allow more tryptophan to go into the brain, so you increase the production of serotonin there, because normally the enzyme tryptophan hydroxylase type 1 is not, I'm sorry, type 2 is not saturated. So if you give it extra tryptophan, it will produce more serotonin. And on the other side, on the other hand, serotonin activates the enzyme aromatase. So it really becomes a vicious circle. Most of these things are kind of created to go well together, and you only have to trigger one of them to basically initiate the entire cascade. This shouldn't come as a surprise. It's always systemic. It's always a field. This whole thing that one thing can be out of whack and everything else will be normal happens very rarely.
Hear that all the time.
Say it again?
I hear that all the time. It's just this one thing is wrong.
Of course, If we can nail this one thing, everything will go back to normal. Well, if the person is feeling like crap and they're barely moving, how can you believe that it's, I don't know, it's only ferritin that's involved? There's so many. So even if it was only one thing, I pick one enzyme or like one biomarker and start looking on PubMed, and you'll see for whatever disease you chose, that you'll see how many other different things it affects. You either look at the body as a system or you don't. And if you're not of the systemic approach, then in my opinion, this is a hopeless approach, because you'll always be finding new enzymes, always be finding new biomarkers. At every energy level, you'll be finding new cellular components. And basically keep in mind that the physicists are still discovering new particles. The bigger large hadron colliders they build, the more energetic they are, the more the more fine-grained the matter splitting becomes, and the bigger zoo of particles they discover. That doesn't mean there's any end to it. It's just you can become more and more energetic up to infinity, and you're going to be finding more particles. That's, to me, sounds like a lost cause. We shouldn't be looking at things like that. You should adopt the Bohmian approach that everything is an undivided whole. It should be treated as such, even if you can create a sketch by using specific biomarkers. But the biomarkers themselves should not become the goal, because as even Harvard Medical School has said, that was like a motto, has been there for at least 100 years, that says that as soon as a biomarker becomes a goal instead of a biomarker, it ceases to carry any meaningful information.
I was going to say, I thought the Large Hadron Collider was a big money laundering scheme.
Really?
I don't know. I'm just joking. It might be.
Well, of course it is. They're career physicists. I mean, like, what are you going to do if you take away their Large Hadron Collider? Then at some point the public will get. So look, these people are very good mathematicians, which means they can conjure things out of thin air, conjure things up out of thin air, publish a lot of papers that nobody understands except like maybe one or two other people of their own field. Of course, these people have the exact same interests, right? They need more funding, and basically, I think the reason the Large Hadron Collider was built is that the theoretical physicists sense that their work is becoming too abstract and it's becoming very difficult to ask for more money, because at some point it becomes a fairy tale, like string theory physics. It's untestable, unprovable. And yes, it was very cool like 20 years ago. You can make a PhD out of it, probably still can. But in terms of like your financial prospects after graduation, basically, as of right now, it's not the darling of physics or of the funding agencies anymore. So they realized they needed something more concrete, and even though it's still useless largely, because think about it, what has the Large Hadron Collider done?
That was
mankind?
My question. Yeah, I don't think it's produced anything. I mean,
it validated the standard model, right? But then it still didn't explain away dark energy, still didn't explain away dark matter, right? Still couldn't explain gravity at the quantum level, right? So essentially, so it's like, oh, I have this cool theory here. We kind of know it's true at this level of energy if you believe in the abstraction of elementary particles. So let's confirm that these particles that we've been talking about are there. Oh, give us 40 billion. And there you go. Boom, 40 billion.
Somebody probably thought about that on Epstein's Island. That's what.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, like coked out of their minds, and I don't know what else they'll be using it. And I think Pete is actually not that much against cocaine. Wasn't he? Didn't he send some article to somebody who emailed him saying like,
I'm just joking. I think he has an article called "Cocaine Babies."
Yeah,
where
exactly.
The whole thing is
pregnant women with like taking cocaine.
Yeah, no, it's isn't there? There's like a family of procaine, lidocaine, and that fits into his whole schematic of it being antihistamine, and antihistamines are anti-serotonins, are anti-endotoxin, and And so that, I think that's why
K has a biphasic effect, which is probably why he hasn't recommended it yet.
Well, I'm sure purity would be an issue too. Like, did you ever try lidocaine? I remember you're a little bit concerned on the liver effects.
I actually bought some from there's like a numbing cream. I think it's called like Doan's like a pain reliever cream or something from local CVS. And if you look at the ingredients, basically it's I think it was like lidocaine or procaine, one of the two, and some other fairly benign ingredients. So I actually squeezed a little bit into an empty capsule and ingested it, and it had a very calming effect, but did not change my digestion much. You know what did? The progesterone dissolved in MCT, which you and I talked about. Yeah. So I'll send you a bottle. I'm not gonna, I don't want to, bias you in any way, but try it out and let me know. For me, the progesterone dissolved in MCT works very similar to antibiotics. Very similar.
Interesting.
I know Pete says it doesn't go through the lymphatic system and all that, but I do what works, and for me that works the best. Olive oil, probably because I'm getting the crappy fake kind, even though I get it from Whole Foods. People will probably say, well, that's exactly who sells the fake kind, because it's 3-4 times the price of the regular one in the regular store.
I posted a brand on my Instagram. It was from Bragg, and then I put it in my refrigerator for a little while, like the coldest part of the fridge, and it hardened up really well. Like I had another bottle which did not, and I wrote them, and they said that that test wasn't completely accurate for the authenticity of olive oil. But something I have kind of learned from tasting a few different, like really overpriced ones at the Western grocery store here is that they have like a peppery taste after.
Exactly. Yeah. Not only pepper taste, but it scratches your throat a little bit when you ingest it.
Yeah.
There's like a substance called oleoropine. And it's basically now they're selling it as an isolated substance to lower blood pressure, and it apparently works similar to thyroid. If you type oleoropine in Google, you'll come up. We discussed on the forum as well. And I think that's the ingredient that Pete mentioned as a potential anti-cancer agent, because somebody was asking him about olive oil, and I think Pete said, well, you have to be careful because 10% is PUFA, right? Even in the best varieties. But he said if it's real olive oil, it contains some flavonoid chemicals that are highly protective against cancer. And I suspect.
How do you spell it? Oleoropine?
Yeah. Oleuro-pain. There you go.
Okay. Didn't know that.
That's the one, and it's it's a phenolic chemical, and you can control it for thyroid. I think it will basically come up.
Oh, or here's olives. Thyroid?
Yeah, thyroid. Does it come up?
Nope.
No. What about blood pressure? Let's do blood.
Nope. Is this good content?
It's been edited. I actually I tried oleoropine more than 5 years ago as a supplement. And to me, it had an adrenergic effect. And then subsequent, I think studies came out that said that basically it can act as a mixed agonist-antagonist on the beta receptors, but also it can act as an agonist on one of the thyroid receptors. So I don't know. I think that's the one that P had in mind, that when he said that real olive oil contains these phenolic chemicals that are strong, they have strong anti-cancer effect.
Yeah. So when I posted the olive oil thing, some people are like, "Oh yes, I'm going to start using that regularly to cook." And I just want to overemphasize, I'm just using it a little bit on the carrot salad, like half a teaspoon, or mushrooms. I'm not cooking with it.
So is that an American brand? The Bragger? What is it?
No, I think it is an American brand, but it's for some reason it's like heavily imported over here. It's
interesting.
Yeah, this is
also organic.
Yeah, this is actually I took it out of the fridge, and this is actually completely like solid on the sides.
Nice.
Yeah.
So is it like only like portion of it solid, or like the entire thing froze?
Most of it was. A little bit wasn't. But to be honest with you, I didn't really leave it in for that long, and so maybe if I had left it in for longer.
Fridge or freezer?
Fridge.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's actually, that means a lot of saturated fat in there.
Great stuff. Okay, let's do a little ad break here. Okay, you can follow me on Instagram, the Danny Roddy weblog. I post food things, and then I broke down some interviews with Ray and myself, and I'll probably continue doing that whenever I have time. What else? Follow Georgi on twitter.com/hateit. and he posts a lot of great stuff on here. And and I do coaching on patreon.com/DannyRoddy. Although I think it is sold out right now, guys. I'm getting so many messages for when things are going to be open. I am like level 10 working at maximum capacity to talk to as many people as possible. And so like for the first time in life, I'm having a difficulty answering all my email. And so it's actually...
You should hire a hot Mexicana to take care of the emails and discuss things with people. It calms people down, and you only focus on the actual coaching sessions.
That maybe that's in the future after the cyber attack. We'll try something like that. But anyways, I'm trying very hard to get back to everybody. I appreciate your guys' patience. What else was I going to do here? Okay, idealabsdc.com. Georgie, give us an update.
A couple of studies ongoing with the fatty acid oxidation inhibitor. We're going to test combination of vitamin B1 and B3 on cancer. I don't know if you remember the studies that I posted on the forum that thiamine works. First of all, it's a cofactor for pyruvate dehydrogenase, which is the rate-limiting enzyme for oxidizing glucose oxidatively, and also is known to be downregulated in cancer. The famous or infamous drug dichloroacetate, DCA, is a known activator of PDH, pyruvate dehydrogenase. I think that's the main effect. But another one, which I recently found out, is that dichloroacetate, trimethylacetate, also known as pivalic acid, basically both of them act as partial fatty acid oxidation inhibitors. So that may be another reason why DCA worked. And that's maybe another reason why we've never seen a human clinical trial with it. But basically, yeah, we that's one angle we're doing. And thiamine not only is a cofactor for PDH, which means it should increase its activity. It's known to lower lactate and increase carbon dioxide. And many people think, doctors thought until very recently that the reason thiamine raises carbon dioxide is because it simply improves the metabolism of glucose. Apparently, there's an additional mechanism. It's also a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor with a potency pretty similar to acetazolamide. So that's rare, right? It's pretty good effect. You increase the metabolism of glucose and you decrease the degradation of carbon dioxide. Most cancer patients, not most, pretty much all of them have confirmed thiamine deficiency. Of course, medicine says, well, let's just correct it a little bit. We don't think it's going to have therapeutic effects if we give more, but we'll find out. And then niacinamide, several studies, again on the forum, showing that in human equivalent doses of 3 to 4 grams daily, it made liver and pancreatic cancers disappear in rats. So we're going to try to find out that if a combination would work better. We're going to try several different tumors. What else? We're synthesizing several serotonin antagonists. I think I mentioned one of them, sinasterin. It's probably the one that will be most interesting, and which may draw finally the wrath of the FDA against me.
Oh, no.
Because it's an actual drug that the Chinese are using for treating COVID-19, for both prevention and treatment, by the way. Because not many people know, but we may have mentioned in previous podcasts, the viral entry into the cell, and I know the SARS-CoV-2 depends on the ACE2 enzyme to get inside of the cell, but basically studies before that done in the 60s and 70s demonstrated that for some reason blocking the 5-HT2B receptor and the either 5-HT2B or 5-HT2C, which confirms why sinasterin is effective as well, for some reason greatly inhibits or even fully blocks the ability of the virus to take over the cell and convince it to start producing copies of it. I suspect that the reason is probably the improvement of bioenergetics, which serotonin antagonists are known to do, which basically the structure of the cell and its permeability to viruses and any other pathogens greatly depends on its energetic state. So if the anti-serotonin chemical improves that energetic state, then basically the lipid bilayer, if you believe in that, becomes a lot more rigid, a lot more structured, and it's much more difficult for a virus to get in. And also the lysosomes inside of the cell, which can process and get rid of viruses as well. I think their activity also depends on oxidative phosphorylation, and that may be another reason why the serotonin antagonists are helping. So several of them. So sinanserin is one of them. The other one is an old Russian serotonin antagonist, which I think was developed as a rival to cyproheptadine.
Mm-hmm.
The name of the drug is Toxin.
Mm-hmm.
You can Google it if you want. Tropoxin. There you go. Any of those, but basically it's a serotonin antagonist, and it's such a unique name that pretty much any link you find with Tropoxin will be describing the. So it was similar to the drug methisergide or lizuride, and so basically they developed as a treatment to migraine, and they were inspired by the ergot derivatives such as bromocriptine, LSD, lizuride, metergoline, methisergide, I think is another one. Nisergoline, all of the ergot derivatives essentially are good as, and are used in many countries as anti-migraine drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So the Russians said, okay, let's try to do something similar but synthetic, because they wanted a way to be able to produce it, a total synthesis pathway. They can start from scratch and produce it in a lab entirely instead of extracting it from the mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And basically that's what they developed. And it works in dosages similar to cyproheptadine, which means just a few milligrams a day should be pretty potent. So that's another thing we're working on synthesizing. And we synthesized already the 10-methoxyharmalan, which, however, turned out to be already on the radar of authorities. A famous French doctor was recently busted for running, they called it an illegal Parkinson and Alzheimer's disease trial in France. And he administered a combination of chemicals. If you go to like Google and type Harmelan France bust, like the article will come up.
You're gonna have to spell that for me. What was it?
And HARMALAN, and then space N is in Nancy. And then space France.
Okay.
And then space bust. Hold on. That's strange.
I know it is Google.
Is it Google or not?
Oh, maybe if we go to DuckDuckGo.
Or you can type methoxyharmalan first, and let's see if it's going to come up.
Let's we're going to be on here for a while trying to.
Oh, there you go. First one.
Right of
Professor
reply.
Fortulan in prison.
Okay.
No, wild therapeutic trials. There you go. So it happened fairly recently. He got imprisoned because, and he's an actual doctor. And if you do control it for Harmalan, you'll see that one of the drugs he administered, there we go, 6-methoxyharmalan, also known as 10-methoxyharmalan. And if you type 10-methoxyharmalan serotonin antagonist in Google, you'll get the study from the 1960s showing that it is about as effective as LSD. In the same amounts. So this means microgram amounts. And you can buy it freely in the United States, but I'm concerned that because whatever the EU does, the US pays close, they will never miss an opportunity to enforce and limit your options, and the other way around. So I don't want this, and I don't want to draw any unnecessary attention, despite the fact, again, I repeat, the stress, you can buy it from Sigma Aldrich, and it's completely legal still. But it's one thing for Sigma to sell it because they can afford a multi-billion-dollar lawyer. It's another thing for Idealabs to sell it, which will be an invitation for a bust.
Hey, Georgi, I really like doing this podcast, so please don't get picked up. And
very careful. Yeah. I'm very risky.
Okay, great stuff. What was I going to say? Let's close this. Let me read these names real fast before I forget, and we'll read the new names of the people that donated tonight. But I forgot to do this last time. So Pyotr Bagnuski, thank you so much. Chronic supporter of the show. Boost Your Biology, a.k.a. Lucas, thank you so much. Marlon, Linda Bell, Spencer Steele, Noah J, Space 99 Yak, Gene Pack, Evan McIntosh. Guys, thank you so much. Sincerely appreciate it. I forgot to read these names on the last episode, and I think I've figured out a way to not keep goofing that towards the end of the show. But I sincerely appreciate it. All the support for the show is really heartening. And again, we're going to do a mini fundraiser next week with Ray to make this show even better, because it's all about progress and diversifying my computer to not bear the load of all of this stuff. So In the name of progress and diversity, we're going to buy a little bit more equipment.
One last thing
Yes,
about
sir.
the Carmelan.
Yeah.
So if you look at the trial, basically the French busted the guy who is an actual medical doctor, but they actually admitted that his ideas are pretty solid. And the trial was for Parkinson's disease. And remember, Parkinson's disease, and I've posted this on the forum and the blog as well, it's thought of as being driven by dopamine deficiency. However, the tremors, it's not known, dopamine deficiency is not known to trigger tremors in animal studies. And recent studies demonstrated that most of the symptoms of Parkinson's disease are driven by serotonin excess. Serotonin is well known to trigger tremors, and there's a special test for serotonin excess called the head twitch response in animals, which they check if a chemical is serotonergic or not, or if it increases serotonin or not. And if it does, then the animals start twitching their heads unprovoked. So this guy already knew that Parkinson can potentially be treated by a serotonin antagonist. So if nothing else, it's a confirmation. I take it as a great confirmation that that we're on the right track, because another doctor is doing the exact same thing, and the authorities immediately shut him down, because God forbid people realize that Parkinson is an actual disease of serotonin excess. The entire SSRI industry is under question now.
Awesome. I just realized it's 9:46 where I am. I kind of have to be done with these around 10. So we should not. Okay. We should probably do 2 or 3 more articles and then
vitamin D may treat opioid addiction. Yeah, I think that's a great one.
Okay. Because I talk so loud. Okay. Okay. Go for it.
Great study, because first it shows a correlation between addiction and lower vitamin D levels, and then it shows you can cure the addiction by administering vitamin D.
Wow.
Cover your ears, Danny. We're gonna get blasted again for promoting fake science. So whatever our
number one fan of cholecalciferol right here. I am biggest vitamin D fan.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say. If you scroll down, there's an underlining red quote, and basically the guy who did the study said it can become a treatment for addictions.
Well, this kind of ties into your PTH and what was the mental problem?
The bipolar disorder. Yeah, right there. So any kind of a mental disorder, of course, has a physiological underpinning, right? And it's, of course, he has an energetic underpinning ultimately. Remember, and then since you already mentioned, we're talking about vitamin D and these disorders. Remember the one about 2 weeks ago saying that vitamin deficiency lowers energy production in muscles by more than 40% and leads to sarcopenia, right? Well, if it does that everywhere as well, then remember the older studies showing that aggression can be caused by simply depleting ATP levels by 10 or 15% was enough to turn the animals into completely berserk rabbit beasts, like kind of like the locusts, grasshoppers turning into locusts. So this is like a long line of things that these are all pieces of the puzzle and corroborate each other. And vitamin D apparently is one of those cardinal protective agents, because look at how many different conditions it has now been shown to be able to help, right? Some people say, well, all of the evidence is about mental disease. No, what about the sarcopenia, right? And it was it's muscles and brain. It's not enough. Okay, what about the liver disease, which we had that one already, right? What about kidney disease, which we already had that one? What about removing scars? Topical vitamin D removing scars. Topical vitamin D and K growing your penis. For those who are more interested in so all of these things, they're so diverse, which suggests that vitamin D has a very central core effect on metabolism. And my suspicion is that two of its effects are the one that I think are most responsible, are aside from the calcium homeostasis. Number one, vitamin D is a steroid, and it already shown to block the cortisol receptor. So it works similarly to progesterone in that respect. Speaking of progesterone, vitamin D being a steroid has been shown to activate the progesterone receptor, block also partially the estrogen receptor. So activate the progesterone receptor and block the estrogen one. Also being able to partially activate the thyroid receptor, and also partially being able to activate the androgen receptor, which probably explains the increase in penis length, because it can also be done with dihydrotestosterone, strong androgen agonist. So all of these things demonstrate that it's got this core function. So blocking the stress hormones, I think, is one of them. And the other one is that it's also an inhibitor of tryptophan hydroxylase. So just very, very diverse set of activity, but very broad, right? Basically a few core functions that affect metabolism in the cell, both at the glycolytic and the oxidative phosphorylation level. And not many other chemicals are like that. I would say progesterone and thyroid, obviously, right? But aside from those, I don't know of any other thing that's over the counter. It's relatively safe, and it has such strong systemic pro-metabolic, anti-inflammatory, and even anti-aging effect. The cloto protein, the anti-aging protein, is structurally very similar to vitamin D, and it's activated by vitamin D, as is also activated by androgens. So, all of these functions suggest that it's one of the core tools of the pro-metabolic warrior, if you want to talk about war on disease, because it's such a fashionable thing to look at diseases in the Western world. And again, you can find it anywhere, right? I mean, I know there's a lot of people saying like you shouldn't be supplementing with it, but the studies that I sent you, some of them used up to 1 million units a day, and there was no hypercalcemia. So if it also shows that consuming cholecalciferol increases the degradation, the enzyme that degrades calcitriol. So even if there is an increase in calcitriol, since because you're taking a precursor, which is a famous argument by I forget his name on Twitter, saying like, it's madness to claim that taking a precursor will lower the final product. Well, it does. And in humans too. So that's it. I mean, it says treating vitamin D deficiency may offer a new way to help reduce the risk of whatever the opioid addiction disorders. And finally, our results suggest that we may have an opportunity in the public health arena to influence the opioid epidemic. Wow. By simply supplementing vitamin D. What else can be done for this? Pregnenolone. If you go to PubMed and type pregnenolone opioid or pregnenolone alcohol, you will see that pregnenolone can actually treat that as well, probably through slightly different mechanisms. Pregnenolone alcohol addiction or pregnenolone alcoholism. And then you should be able to find those studies. Pregnenolone alcoholism. It will probably autocorrect. There you go. Pregnenolone and ganaxolone, the very first one. Reduce operant ethanol self-administration in alcohol-preferring rats. Right there. They're claiming that the reason it does so because ganaxolone is essentially allopregnanolone. So they're saying pregnenolone is a precursor to allopregnanolone, and that's how it helps. I think there's more to that than meets the eye. I think pregnenolone it has some effects that are similar to naltrexone. I think it's a known antagonist at one of the opioid receptors. So if you type pregnenolone opioid receptor, I think you'll get the study that shows that. And in combination with vitamin D, that may be a really great combination. And they have many other synergistic effects, but it will be maybe a great combination for people struggling with alcohol and opioid addiction, quote unquote, which is really just a symptom of stress. But now with the pandemic and everything, again, quote unquote pandemic, a lot of people under a lot of stress and probably self-medicating with less than optimal substances. You should be able to help yourself by simply upping your pregnenolone and vitamin D intake.
Well, speaking of allopregnanolone,
forgot. Coming this week,
yeah.
we will release allopregnanolone. Totally slipped my mind. We'll replace the 5-alpha dihydroprogesterone with allopregnanolone. I think way too many people complain and got Pete involved to say like, you shouldn't be supplementing this thing because it's like it can block progesterone's effects or like decrease its effects. But allopregnanolone is pretty safe. I don't know of any study that has shown any hormone imbalancing effects of it. It's pretty benign in terms of upsetting the hormonal balance. And a lot of people have asked for it because a lot of people that struggle with post-finasteride syndrome, PFS, they cannot get hold of androgens like dihydrotestosterone or other strong androgen agonists, and they're basically they're asking for allopregnanolone because it's already preformed. And in those people, 5-alpha dihydroprogesterone, several people email us said like it helps, but I have to keep taking it, and also it loses its effectiveness over time. However, one of them managed to get allopregnanolone from a chemical company and said that it cured his PFS. Wow. Let's see. I mean, I'm not making any claims. By the way, PFS is not a recognized condition by the FDA, so should be less of a problem to talk about trying to help it.
Well, this gets into a whole can of worms, but like whenever somebody comes on a forum and is like, hey guys, I'm cured of XYZ, I'm always like, they're usually back within a month or two or whatever, and so
then they turn into lurking. You can
Yeah.
tell them like, commenting here and there.
I just
we'll see. We'll see. I've tried it. It has a much more potent sedative effect than progesterone does. And in fact, it was used as a general anesthetic, and some steroids derived from it. They were used and developed as general anesthetics back in the early 20th century. For whatever reason, they didn't catch up as general anesthetics, but I think they're still used in the veterinary medicines in some countries in the world to actually replace the general anesthesia that normally you get put under with whatever toxic drug by actually administering allopregnanolone or steroids closely related to it.
Yeah, let me just be extremely clear here. I'm not negating that person's experiencing. I'm saying I think PFS is way more complicated than a lot of people think. And a person working a job they hate or familial things or being alone, I think all those types of things factor into this like continued sense of hopelessness that people
and agitation.
Yeah, and then
not right.
And like we talked about earlier, I strongly don't believe that there's single bullet approaches to things like that. It's like systemic dysfunction that existed before the person took finasteride that was probably made even worse by the finasteride. And so again, not that single bullet approach where, I was just missing XYZ. That
only reason we're releasing it is to replace the 5-alpha DHP, which people seem to be wary about. And Pete has said that he would rather not use it long term because he thinks it can interfere or at least create an imbalance of basically progesterone's effects. But I think when people emailed him about allopregnanolone, he said it can be tried, but he just didn't see what it can do that progesterone couldn't. So we're just replacing whatever we have with a hopefully less risky steroid.
Well, isn't that also a new drug by pharma? Like, isn't that a little bit risky?
It is, but we're going to release it in relatively low amounts and be dissolved into tocopherol. So I'm hoping that it's not going to compete with big pharma. They're administering it as an infusion, and it's a relatively large dose in order to trigger the immediate antidepressant effects. I think they're using like a couple of 100 milligrams. And the reason it's done as infusion because at such dosages, you get knocked out. So you have to be under the supervision of a doctor, I guess, because if they inject you or, infuse you with 100 milligrams of allopregnanolone, you'll be so drunk. Oh, speaking of which, you want to get the benefit, you want to get the social effects of alcohol without the side effects. A higher dosage of progesterone or any of the steroids derived from it, especially allopregnanolone, will pretty much overlap with the social effects, the drunkenness, the disinhibition, the improvement in mood, but without without most of the negative side effects of alcohol, especially on the liver.
Awesome. Guys, 150 people watching, 95 likes. Give us a like if you love cholecalciferol, and really appreciate that. Okay, let's do one more, and then we'll have to call it a night because I don't want to keep my neighbor up all night.
So your neighbor can go to bed without you?
Again, I'm very loud.
What is her name, Danny? Why don't you introduce her?
She's really cool. I talked to her almost. She's super into. She would fit in right into this conversation. She's actually the most woke person I know in Mexico. It's crazy.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. So let's do one other one. What did I put in the title of this episode? Maybe something about.
I haven't seen it.
Something about PUFA, but I can't remember.
Oh, the last one, polyunsaturated fatty acid deficiency. It reverses effects of alcohol on mitochondrial energy metabolism.
Oh, perfect.
For those who continue to claim that PUFA is essential, take a look at this study. It basically demonstrates that alcohol has a powerful anti-mitochondrial effect, usually temporary, but then again, you don't know what happens with continued use. And what happens is that if you become deficient in EFA, which is a type of PUFA, there is a drastic increase in the levels of cytochrome C oxidase. So scroll up until the end, which is the conclusion.
Just totally screwed up my screen size. What?
Did?
Well, so we will have to deal with this very
conclusion, and I think it talks about the cytochrome C oxidase. Yeah, there we go. PUFA elevation, reverse alcohol-related mitochondrial position with decrease in phospholipid acidotic correlated, which raises cytochrome oxidase activity. The crucial enzyme that is basically easily blocked and easily destroyed with aging, right? It decreases in quantity. You can get like a lipofuscin can get in there and block it pretty permanently.
Cardiolipin.
Cardiolipin as well, right? Cardiolipin actually and cytochrome C oxidase work together. And basically nitric oxide easily blocks, and the bond between nitric oxide and cytochrome C oxidase is pretty strong, and very few things can break it. So you either have to produce new cytochrome C oxidase, which apparently PUFA deficiency, EFA deficiency is a great way to achieve that, or you have to break that bond. And the few things, I think, the three things that I read that are capable of doing it are methylene blue, magnesium, and zinc.
Red light,
and basically red light as well. Yes, especially red light in combination with methylene blue. But you have to be careful because you'll be increasing the reactive oxygen species if you're not consuming sufficient amount of carbs. Didn't Ray had a newsletter about like the heat exposure? How if you expose yourself to heat like beyond a certain level, you're triggering like the shock proteins.
I think we talked about it on one of the episodes. Yeah.
So yeah, and he said that red lights, if you're under red light and start feeling a little bit jittery, reach for that orange juice because you're basically running low on fuel.
Great. Yeah, there's this is like a real key part of Ray's work. And so I kind of monitor Ray's name on Twitter, and people laugh at the idea that these polyunsaturated fats can be harmful. And it's our finding that arachidonic acid and D-docosahexaenoic acid concentrations increase supports the hypothesis that cardiolipin remodeling occurs with aging. Increased lipid peroxidation is a plausible mechanism for which cardiolipin levels decrease with age. And that corresponds to a decrease in the cytochrome C oxidase enzyme. And it's an enzyme, right? Or protein?
It's both. The actual enzyme and protein is usually enzymes are proteins.
Okay, good to know. Anyways,
the receptor also a protein. So pretty much everything in the cell, like if we're all composed of amino acids, right? So ultimately everything comes down to mostly amino acids and a few metals here and there.
Yeah, and just to beat a dead horse, cardiolipin is a phospholipid found almost exclusively at the level of intermitochondrial membrane, where it is biosynthesized under the thyroid hormone regulation, a specific and tight association between cytochrome C oxidase and cardiolipin. And this cardiolipin is normally saturated, and then when a person eats lots of PUFA over a lifetime, it becomes unsaturated, and then it slows down cytochrome C oxidase, which is important for transferring electrons to oxygen. And so
and also when it becomes more unsaturated, it becomes easier attack for reactive oxygen species and iron, and it can actually form a lipofuscin inside of the cardiolipin, and at that point it becomes almost impossible to get rid of. Basically, this accumulation of lipofuscin in the cell, it's thought that the biggest danger, the biggest drawback or hindering of metabolism is when it does this to the cardiolipin, not just pure lipofuscin accumulating in the cell, which cell apparently has a way of getting rid of, sometimes by drinking alcohol, as we discussed in one of the podcasts with Ray. But I don't think alcohol can get rid of the lipofuscinized cardiolipin, which is only possible for this to form if the composition changed, and it changes if you're eating more PUFA.
Didn't Ray say maybe DHEA could get rid of lipofuscin, or am I crazy?
Tocopherol, vitamin E can. That's one of the, but it's also a type of alcohol, right? So there seems to be like so things that can act as a solvent for lipids may be able to get rid of it, but you have to be careful because alcohol turned out to be a very narrow window of benefit, which translated to about 2 to 3 drinks per day, which, by the way, the vast majority of epidemiological studies claim that this is the amount of alcohol that's good for you to drink daily, and anything more than that rapidly becomes detrimental, mostly because of alcohol's depleting effect on ATP. It decreases the degradation of ATP. It decreases the synthesis of ATP. It has estrogenic effects. It increases the endotoxin, right? It's many different bad effects of alcohol if you overdo it. But in smaller amounts, it seems to be capable of dissolving lipofuscin, in which allows the cell to get it outside of it and dump it into the bloodstream. So DHEA also in low amounts has been shown to decrease or at least block the increase of lipofuscin into the brain and liver. I don't know if you can do it in any organ, but if you can do it in those two, that's pretty impressive and beneficial. And I don't see a reason why you wouldn't be able to do it in others as well.
Great stuff. Yeah, I won't look this up. Okay, let me just read these stickers really quickly. So 1999 from our brother Ozan, Primitive Initiative. I have an interview with Ozan on, I think it's on Spotify, great person. Love talking with him. Thank you so much, Ozan. Marcelo for $50. Guys, thank you so much. Sincerely appreciate it. This will go directly towards new equipment. Pyotr, again, Bagnuski, thank you so much for $1.99. Comrade James for $10. Thank you so much, James. Jackson Tomlinson for $10. Thank you so much. XR for $10. Thank you so much. Teresa, $4.99. Thank you so much, Teresa. Space 99 Yak for $4.99. And then these were questions that we'll tackle when Ray gets here. And so I don't think we need that much money, to be honest with you. So maybe we'll take this money and we'll buy you a new mic, which can get pricey.
I like my mic. I'm attached to it emotionally. This is what I first started using when we started doing these things. Don't be touched. I'm loyal to my mic.
Okay, well, on that note, Georgi, any topics or anything you want to do an outro with, or what? How do you feel?
You mean like for Pete's podcast? Or?
No, just anything on your mind.
I don't know. I mean, I guess like if anybody has any ideas of what can be done to kind of fight inflation. And, I personally like gold. I know a lot of people think of that as well, but Ray thinks we're fully done in. So in that case, I don't know how buying land or farm will do it, because the reason I'm not considering these things is because it's so expensive. Everybody's pouring money into land, Bill Gates specifically. And I think Eric Schmidt as well. The 1% are buying land like crazy, especially in Texas, and also housing. So these things are pretty much they're not an option. I'm not rich, but like things that can basically help out with putting a little bit of a dent, or at least a little bit of a reining in inflation a little bit. I'm all ears, and that's pretty much it. I'm waiting, I guess, just like you, waiting for the world to end and trying to have fun in between.
Well, there was some Netflix movie that was about power outage. Netflix. Power.
Oh, they got pulled?
No. I'm just saying this is like predictive programming kind of stuff. Yeah. Movie where it was. I don't think that's the. Do you guys know what it is in the chat? It's a Netflix movie, and it was like, what would happen if the power went out? And people were going nuts like instantly. It's not Project. Really? It's not Project Power.
Well, they don't have internet, so their addiction suddenly will go into abstinence. Oh yeah, dude. Have you talked to somebody who is addicted to not addicted, but like cannot really live without their phone?
Oh yeah.
I saw people get quickly violent.
I think it's called awake.
And freak out if they thought they lost their phone, or like they're in a position or in a place where they couldn't use their phone for like 10 minutes. It truly is addiction. It's for some people. They're physically in pain and freaking out, and their world is collapsing because they cannot look at their phone. They don't care about anybody who's around them.
I know a lot of people, and even in 2016, I knew people that would say, "Hey, how are you doing today?" And then they take out their phone and look at it. It was like seriously pathological issue. Like
have you been to parties lately in the United States? You know what they consist of? A bunch of people looking at their phones, and that's it.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but I'm don't hang out with many people. This movie, if you watch the trailer, is something kind of like a cyber attack, taking out power and infrastructure. And then there was a recent video by Ice Age Farmer, again furthering the discussion about the breakdown in supply chain. So
is he still banned?
He's on YouTube, I think.
So he got reinstated?
Yeah, he went through some kind of ban process, but he's one of the best. He really does a good job with putting everything together. So, well, what would you do if the power went out tomorrow?
I'm really not dependent on power. I mean, basically, I can go by candles. Well, actually, some of the machinery for producing the supplements will be affected, but ultimately, we can go back to doing everything by hand. It's not that I wouldn't say that's problematic. It's just more labor intensive. But if the power went out, I'm not going to be getting any orders either. Yeah. So I think there will be a problem, that will solve itself. So if there's no power, there's no business. So you go back to spending time with your family and protecting yourself from marauders and thinking about your next meal. That's pretty much it. That's what life will be about.
Well, it's good to hear. I didn't know you had a family in DC, so that's great to hear that.
Yeah, my brother came. Yeah. I mean, when I came first here in the United States in '97, I came for college, and then later on he came for the same reason. And basically, that's pretty much why I'm in DC. That, and also like it's up until recently used to have this like balance between a large city and like a more not rural, but like a place. It's very walkable. The streets are very very wide. No building can be higher by law than the Capitol Hill. So which means not pretty much, but all buildings are capped at 12 floors. So it's like you can see the sky pretty much everywhere. There's a lot of greenery. You can again like very walkable, but it's starting to become less safe lately. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, last question. What would happen if shit? What was my question? The power could go out. What happened if you couldn't get water? That was the question I was looking for.
Well, I go to Potomac and I basically have a system which we talked about the most primitive one, this river right around the corner. You go, you get some water, and you can disinfect it by basically either boiling it, right? Or when the sun comes out, you pour it in these plastic bottles that are basically very concave in shape, and you keep it there for a couple hours, and they should be safe to drink. It's not going to taste great, but it will be drinkable. And also you can buy like a water distilling machine or at least filtration system for a couple of grand off Amazon, and apparently works pretty well. And military uses it too. So maybe now you're giving me ideas. Maybe that's like, because outside of food and water and medicine, pretty much everything else is dispensable with, right? Or maybe weapons. I mean, I'm starting to get really keen on the idea of you got to have something to protect yourself with, because like even right now, I don't feel very safe in the city, especially at night. Imagine what will happen if suddenly like there's a power outage, like a supply chain crisis or something, and there's like shortage of food. It will not look pretty in any big city. And DC is not small. It's city. I mean, population wise.
I always wanted to buy a distiller, but electricity here is like a hot commodity, and so you can't just use a distiller
They have it working with sun batteries too. So you can buy. That's probably actually a pretty good idea to get one.
Also, they're super heavy, and so that was like I can't be lugging that around everywhere. Okay, everybody. So Ray Pete will be on next week. I've already talked to him, and he was A-okay with doing a Q&A episode. It will not be curated by me. I won't be picking and choosing questions. I'll just be asking them as they come in. I haven't turned back on the super chats, but whenever I make the episode, which probably will be like Thursday or Friday, I'll let everybody know on the Telegram t.me/Danielrati when we'll start doing the super chats. And the caveat is like only ask a super chat if you're okay with it possibly not being answered. Because I really don't know how many questions we'll get, but we only have two hours to go through all of them. And so we'll try to rifle through as many as possible. But it is a fundraiser. We're trying to buy something called an ATEM Mini Extreme, and then I need a new laptop. And so for anybody that cares, we're going to like put Skype on another laptop, plug it into the ATEM Mini, and my computer will be greatly deburdened, if that's a word, of all the things that it has to do. And I think just things will be a lot smoother and the sound will be better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, guys, sincerely appreciate it. 144 people watching. Guys, give us a like. That really supports the show. Appreciate it a lot. And again, we have an amazing listenership. Georgi and I always talk about off air on how fortunate we are that 60 episodes, and it took that long, I feel like, to, I don't know, feel really comfortable. And I really owe it all to you. And, and I couldn't do this without you, Georgi. So sincerely appreciate it. And
same thing here, man. Yeah. It's my Friday therapy session. Or in this case, Saturday.
Cool, brother. Okay, everybody be safe. Have a great Saturday, Sunday. We'll talk to you guys next Friday, and peace out.
Hey, happy Father's Day to the ones that have kids.
Oh, yeah, I need to message my dad. Okay, bye, everybody.